Yeah, hi again. I'm Wendy. I work at CFAS, if you weren't here earlier. I'm going to talk about the work we've done on generating the economic impact, specifically about the recreational catch and release program we have for Atlantic Bluefin Tuna, but direct from angler expenditure. For some context, Atlantic Bluefin Tuna has been increasing in UK waters, and we needed some science to generate data for evidence-based policy. So we had a catch and release tagging program that we called CHART that ran from 2021 to 2023, and within that, a select few charter vessels were able to take paying anglers out to tag and release bluefin tuna. And there was 15 vessels in 2021, 25 in 2022, and 24 in 2023. And between those years, there was 1,000 to 1,700 anglers each year, and it generated between 868,000 to 2.2 million economic impact. They're all inflated to 2023 values. So it was quite successful. So it was then expanded into a recreational catch and release fishery from 2024 onwards. And then that expanded to have more charter vessels, and then also allowed for private vessels to also fish tuna, but they didn't need to tag it. Overall, this is a bit of background on the CRF program. So it stands for the Catch and Release Recreational Fishery for tuna. It was expanded from chart, and then it expanded to include 93 licenses for both private and charter vessels in 2024. And it allowed them to catch from pole and line methods only, or rod and line. But there was mandatory reporting for it, so they had to report everything they caught. So we wanted to know about the economic impact from the anglers that went on these trips. So at the end of each trip, we asked them to fill out an online survey, and then we also advertised that through Facebook. So we asked if they'd been on a tuna fishing trip recently to fill out this survey, which gave us a general profile of the anglers, their opinions and what they thought the benefits were, and then the spending, how much they spent on a range of categories, so we could generate a total economic impact. So this is kind of the process we followed. So we had the survey that got us the characteristics and the spending, and then we also split by types of anglers, because the people that spend on a private vessel would be spending very differently to the people that that paid a charter to go and fish. But I think the general process was fairly similar. So for charter anglers, we estimated their average spend per trip, and then we raised it to the total, or we got the average spend of all of the anglers on the trip. So of that whole trip, if there was like 4 anglers, how much everyone spent towards it. And then we raised that to the total number of CRF, or tuna trips, that there were that year. And then we did an input-output analysis to get the total economic impact, gross value added, and jobs created. And then we did a counterfactual to assess what was the direct impact of CRF. And then for the private anglers, we did a same trip spend. So we estimated how much they spent on their last trip and raised that to the total number of trips that were recorded. And then we also did something on their average investment over the past year, and we raised that to the total number of private vessels that were included. And then again, we did the input-output analysis to get the economic impact, and we did a counterfactual. I'll go into what we did for the counterfactual in a bit. So this is just some general characteristics. So we had quite a small response rate, so we had about 8% of the trips we had at least one response from. There was over 1,000 trips in 2024. 791 were from charter boats, and 210 were from private. The anglers were generally white, male, and between 55 and 59 years old, and they generally had a higher household income. And we asked what they travelled for, and a lot of them said they specifically travelled to do the bluefin tuna trips. And charter anglers generally spent about 5 days in the area and fished for about 2.7 days, and travelled in groups of about 2.9 people, so 3 people. And then private anglers spent much longer in the area. Oh no, across the whole year they did about 18 trips, and then they spent much longer in the area, so they spent about 13 days for each of their trips, and then they did 7.4 of those days fishing, and they travelled in a fairly similar group size, so they travelled with 2.8 people. But for the private boats, we were only able to get the economic impact of the person that owned the boat, not anyone that they took on board. But they also would have an impact, but we haven't been able to account for it here. So, yeah, this is the total expenditure. So for charter boats, the total expenditure was 2.6 million, and then for private, it was a lot less, at 100,000 for the trips, and then 498,000 for their total investments. And the charter anglers we compared with 2023 because they're doing the same sort of thing. So there was a 44% increase from 2023, so the last year of chart, which was 1.8 million. And the charter anglers generally spent most of their money on their charter fees. It took up about 50% of their trip expenditure, and we also asked them where they spent their money. So they spent most of it in the southwest, which was relatively similar to chart in 2023, which primarily operated in the southwest, but obviously it was expanded in 2024, so there was slightly less. And then for private anglers, the majority of their expenditure was on new boats. So a few people purchased a new boat, so that massively drove up their averages for that bit. So it was about 63%, but their expenditures was much more widespread. So it was 44% in the southwest, and then 55% in the wider UK economy. And then this is the results of the economic impact. So for charter anglers, they spent there was a direct impact of 2 million and a total economic impact of 4.3, a gross value added of 1.1, and it supported 48 jobs across the year, which again was a lot higher than 2023. So it was 41% higher than 2023. And then private anglers had a direct impact of 425,000, a total economic impact of 924, a GVA of 215, and it supported 7 jobs. And again, it was considerably higher than 2024. I think I've just repeated that bullet point, so I don't think that counts for that. And then we also did a per license impact. So we did the economic impact divided by the number of licenses that were issued. So the per license impact was a lot lower in 2024 than it was for chart in 2023, but this was because there was a lot more licenses and fewer, and not as dramatic an increase in trips because there was quite bad weather, I think, in August and November, so they couldn't do as many. But again, this assumes all of the spending was directly due to chart, so we did some counterfactuals and we treated them differently. So the chart anglers, we asked them what they would do if chart or if tuna fishing wasn't available, and then we made several assumptions based on their answers. So if they said they would fish for tuna elsewhere, they would have to go abroad because it's not legal outside of the program. So all of their spending except for accessories would have gone abroad. So we just kept what they would spend on their accessories. If they go angling elsewhere, they would spend what would be a normal trip spend, which we get from the Sea Angling Diary. And then if they do nothing, we assume that all of their spending could be attributed to tuna. If they go in the southwest for a different type of angling. It's their charter fees and their accessories and what they spend on hotels and things, I think. And then if they do something else in the southwest, it's the same but without, then the charter fees would be attributed to CRF. And then for the private anglers, because there was a lot fewer, we couldn't split them into so many groups, but we asked them what they would do, and most of them said that they had replaced their normal sea angling activity with tuna trips. So we assumed that all of the trips that would have happened regardless, and any spending above what is a normal expenditure for boat trips could be attributed directly to chart. And we got the normal expenditure from our sea angling diary program where we can do the economic impact studies. So once we'd split all of that and took out the assumptions, we did the economic impact or the input-output analysis again. And then we could find that 74% for charter anglers and 73% for private anglers of their spending could be directly attributed to tuna fishing. Their total economic impact with the counterfactual was 3.1 for charter and then 600,000 for private boat anglers, and supported 35 and 5 jobs. But we had to make several assumptions throughout this because we only had an 8% response rate, so we had to assume that they were all representative. It was a random sample, so how that relates to future surveys is a bit, would need more studies to generate more robust estimates, I think. Overall, there's spend from anglers was higher than without tuna, so 73 and 74% was attributed to chart, and when you can combine the two together, there was a total economic impact of 3.8 million, provided 747,000 GVA and 40 jobs, and 20% of that was from private vessel owners, which was a 1.7 increase from chart, the last year of chart. But again, this was from the first year of the program, so that might change as it develops more. Thank you.